I can't believe it's taken me this long to do a video about Jujutsu Kaisen. I binged Jujutsu Kaisen in 2 days, which honestly could have been 1, but, you know, work. But regardless, I absolutely fell in love with the series. All the characters are likable, the animation is top tier, and the story arcs kept me hooked the entire time. I haven't really read further into the manga, but from what I've seen from season 1 so far, A+. However, when I recommend the series to newcomers, people kind of write it off as a Naruto clone, and I'm like, what? So I took a step back and I was like, okay, I can see where on the surface the characters are kind of reminiscent of Team 7, but today I'm here to tell you why the characters in Jujutsu Kaisen are totally different from their respective Naruto counterparts. First of all, let's of course start off with the protagonists of each series, Naruto Uzumaki and Yuji Itadori. For those who don't know, Naruto is an orphan boy who lives in the Hidden Leaf Village. The residents of this village have a general fear of Naruto for having a 9-tailed fox demon sealed away in his body as a child. This fear turned into hatred towards Naruto, and left him alone in the village for most of his life. His ultimate dream was to become the leader of the village, the Hokage, so that he can finally be loved by his village. In the other corner we have Yuji Itadori. Yuji is an unbelievably strong high schooler who, after a chance encounter with Megumi Fushiguro, ingests the finger of Sukuna, the Demon King. This ultimately leads him to Jujutsu Tech in Tokyo, and sets him off on a mission to find the other fingers and sacrifice himself to ultimately destroy Sukuna once and for all. I think the main thing that people compare about these two protagonists is the idea that there's some kind of demon that rests within them, and each of them have the ability to talk to it. On top of it, both Naruto and Yuji can pop into their demon form in battle. And of course, you gotta point out the spiky hair and general carefree spirit, which is honestly every single shonen protagonist ever. I think when looking at these two, the core of their characters and their motivations really set them apart. Naruto's motivation comes from a place of reaching for something that he's never had, love and acceptance, and slowly gains it over the course of the series. While on the other hand, Yuji gets caught up in a world beyond his wildest expectations, and makes a noble decision to help the greater good at the expense of his own life. Both motivations are heroic and noble in their own right, but come from completely different places. Next, let's move on to Sasuke Uchiha and Megumi Fushiguro. Sasuke is the last remaining member of the Uchiha clan, who's hell-bent on getting revenge on his brother after witnessing him murder the rest of his clan. Sasuke goes down a very dark path throughout the series and ultimately finds his way back thanks to the relentless encouragement and words from Naruto. Megumi is a first-year sorcerer who uses the 10 Shadows technique to summon Shikigami to exorcise curses. His talent has been recognized by many characters throughout Season 1, and he was finally able to show it on full display once he unleashed his domain expansion in episode 23. Now, I get why it's easy to compare both of these brooding bad boys. Both Sasuke and Megumi are the dark-haired, aloof members of their respective teams, and both have access to much darker sides. Not to mention that both are members of highly regarded clans. Sasuke being a member of the Uchiha clan, and Megumi being a member of the Zenin clan. Where I think the main difference actually lies is in their relationships with their teams. After Sasuke leaves the village, and I would argue a bit before that, he was already blinded by his revenge and left his team behind in order to more easily gain power. It also felt like Sasuke could care less about Naruto and Sakura for most of the series. However, Megumi learns to be much more of a team player, and despite his aloofness, is really good friends with both Yuji and Nobara. And just to add, Sasuke and Megumi's fighting styles could not be any more different, with Megumi focusing on summoning, while Sasuke uses an assortment of elemental and Sharingan techniques. Moving on to Sakura Haruno and Nobara Kugisaki. If you guys haven't seen my 5 things I would change about Sakura video, go ahead and check that out now, because you'll get a real good idea about my thoughts on her. Sakura is the only female member of Team 7 who falls head over heels in love with Sasuke Uchiha. She eventually goes on to train with Tsunade and becomes one of the strongest kunoichi of her time. Nobara Kugisaki is a country girl looking to escape to city life through her Jujutsu sorcery studies in Tokyo. She despised how her village treated her childhood friend Saori, which ultimately led to Saori's family being driven out. Nobara leaves her village to both look for Saori, but also has taken it upon herself to live her life to her true and fullest self. Now, honestly, I think most people compare these two ladies for the sheer fact that they are the main female protagonist of each of their series. But I can also see that their personalities can be very similar on the surface level. Both Nobara and Sakura are very hot-headed and self-righteous in their beliefs, and don't shy away from expressing them, even at the expense of Naruto and Yuji respectively. Where I think the key difference in their character lies is in their views of their own self-worth. Sakura goes throughout the series trying to find her purpose in the ninja world, and ultimately finds it in herself as she gains more strength and knowledge. Nobara, on the other hand, comes in guns a-blazing, already knowing that she's a badass and wearing it proudly on her chest. While both women are indeed very powerful and talented, their paths to get there and their starting points are completely different. Last but not least, let's take a look at Kakashi Hatake and Satoru Gojo. Kakashi is the leader of Team 7 who possesses the Sharingan given to him by his old friend Obito. Kakashi uses the Sharingan to quickly copy other jutsu and uses this on top of his other skills to eventually rise to the position of Hokage. Despite his skill, Kakashi isn't afraid to show off his funny side also, especially when interacting with Might Guy. Gojo, on the other hand, is a super laid-back and chill principal of Jujutsu Tech Tokyo, and is renowned as one of the best Jujutsu sorcerers out there. Gojo usually doesn't take life that seriously and opts for a more laid-back approach, but when it comes to the battlefield, Gojo will 100% get the job done. Visually, I can see why people would compare Gojo and Kakashi. Both are tall, lanky, white-haired men with parts of their face covered by cloth. Both also generally take things fairly lightly, but are still very skilled fighters on the battlefield. And of course, both of these men are in respected leadership positions. Where I think the biggest difference lies between these two is in their power levels and how that affects their character. Despite Kakashi being very talented, he is far from being the strongest ninja in Naruto. Because of this, Kakashi just seems more attached to the world around him than Satoru Gojo. Gojo's power level is through the roof, and is the strongest sorcerer in the series thus far. He's almost achieved god status, and at first seems much more detached from the world, and mostly chooses to enjoy it for what it is. However, he ultimately still cares about the world and people around him, looking to reform the Jujutsu world for future generations. Overall, I just gotta say, watch Jujutsu Kaisen. The hype is real, and it's one of my favorite modern animes so far. And I can see why people would generally compare it to Naruto, but honestly, every genre has its tropes. But it's what you do with those tropes that makes each and every series unique and special.